Lakeview Pines was the kind of neighborhood that sold itself. Pristine lawns, uniform mailboxes, luxury homes all nestled beneath towering pine trees, and a sky so blue it looked painted. The kind of place where people waved without knowing your name and liked it that way. But beneath the manicured perfection lurked something rotten. Something that began to ooze into daylight the morning Douglas Brantley collapsed in the middle of a board meeting. Douglas wasn't just the HOA's lawyer. He was their shield, their sword, and their smiling enforcer. He wore three-piece suits to meetings and carried a Mont-Blanc pen like it was a weapon. To the residents, he was both charming and terrifying. He could get your fines waived with a wink or have your property liened with a single letter. That's why, when he clutched his stomach mid-sentence, staggered back from the podium, and dropped to the floor foaming at the mouth, the silence was louder than any scream. And then chaos. Adult balance scale, the meeting that changed everything. The quarterly HOA board meeting was always held in the Lakeview Pines Community Center. 80 residents had packed the room that evening, mostly to protest the upcoming dues hike and aggressive citations for non-conforming lawn colors. Douglas had just finished defending the fines, quoting state housing code and referencing decades of HOA legal precedent. He was calm, too calm. Suddenly, he bent over, one hand gripping the podium, the other pressed against his abdomen. His voice was thick when he said, "Excuse me, I don't feel." He didn't finish. Board President Eleanor Crane shrieked. Secretary Phil Rosser stumbled to call 911. And Janet Harlow, who always sat in the front row to keep an eye on these dictators, was the one to check his pulse. "He's alive," she cried. But barely. The ambulance came fast. The police came faster. By midnight, Douglas Brantley was in a coma. By sunrise, the words "suspected poisoning" were murmured in whispers around every cul-de-sac in Lakeview Pines. Fork and knife with plate, what was in the coffee? Detective Marina Vega didn't waste time. She was 43, sharp-eyed, and had little patience for HOA politics. She'd seen uglier feuds over dogs barking and hedges too high than some homicide cases. Her first question: who had access to Mr. Brantley's food and drink that night? Answer: everyone. Douglas had brought his own coffee thermos, as he always did. But tonight, according to Eleanor, he'd asked for something sweet to cut the bitterness. She offered him a sugar packet from the board snack table. So did Phil. So did a dozen others. But only one person actually handed him a packet: Mallory Dunn. The audience gasped when her name was whispered through the neighborhood. Mallory was 29, a recent homeowner, and one of the most vocal critics of the board. She had accused Douglas of legal extortion in a community newsletter just weeks ago. She'd even threatened to sue. Now, she was the prime suspect. Test tube the toxin. Toxicology came back fast. Douglas had ingested a lethal dose of aconitine, a deadly plant toxin found in wolfsbane. The amount was small, but precisely enough to induce heart arrhythmia and collapse. It was almost elegant in how fast it acted. You'd need knowledge of chemistry, Detective Vega noted, and access to the plant, which was odd, because a search of Mallory Dunn's home yielded neither wolfsbane nor any evidence she'd ever bought or handled it. What they did find was more surprising: a folder labeled HOA lawsuit, class action, with Douglas's name highlighted more than 30 times. Cracks in the foundation. The community was divided. Some thought Mallory was a scapegoat, too obvious, too easy. Others thought she was an activist gone too far. But one thing was clear: Douglas Brantley wasn't just a lawyer. He was a man sitting on a throne of secrets. As the police dug deeper, they found something chilling. Douglas had been involved in 34 HOA legal settlements across the state. Most were sealed. Some were unusually generous to board members. And in Lakeview Pines, rumors swirled of backroom deals, missing community funds, and silence bought with legal threats. "He didn't deserve to die," one resident said. But he wasn't clean. Scroll the letter. 3 days after the incident, the HOA office received an anonymous envelope. Inside, a typed note. Ask Eleanor about the meeting on March 4th. Ask what Douglas threatened to reveal. He was silenced. That date was 5 months earlier, a meeting that had mysteriously been canceled, and replaced with a closed-door board session. Detective Vega now had a bigger question than who poisoned the lawyer. She had to ask, why did someone want him dead, and what was he about to say? The letter changed everything. Detective Marina Vega stared at the anonymous tip like it was a match hovering over dry kindling. If true, the March 4th meeting wasn't just a footnote. It was a motive. She called in the entire HOA board for questioning. They weren't happy, especially Eleanor Crane. Chair behind closed doors. Eleanor Crane had been president of the Lakeview Pines, HOA, for 12 years. She ran the neighborhood like a cruise ship captain, tight, orderly, and always pretending everything was fine. The community respected her. Some feared her. All knew better than to cross her. Detective Vega's questions were direct. What happened on March 4th? Eleanor gave a tight smile. We had to cancel the public meeting. There was a board-only budget issue. Why wasn't it recorded like the others? We forgot to turn on the camera. But there's no record of minutes taken. Eleanor shrugged. It was informal. Nothing to report. But Vega could see the micro-tension in her jaw. She was lying. The others, Phil Rosser, secretary, Rhonda Bell, treasurer, and 2 neighborhood reps, echoed her version. But one of them cracked. A whisper from the quiet man. Jerry Nguyen was the most forgettable face on the board. Retired accountant, lived with his cat, never spoke unless spoken to. After 20 minutes of questioning, he leaned in and said, "Look, I didn't want any part of that night. I told him it was wrong." "What was wrong, Jerry?" He looked around, voice trembling. Douglas had evidence. Real stuff. He said Eleanor had been embezzling HOA funds, transferring small amounts to a consulting firm she secretly owned. Vega's pen stopped. Did he show anything? He said he'd bring it next meeting. But then she convinced him to delay. She said it could destroy the community. Told him it wasn't worth it. And you believed her? Jerry swallowed. Douglas didn't. The shell company. Detective Vega got a search warrant for HOA financial records. It didn't take long to find what she was looking for. Over the last 3 years, nearly $147,000 had been paid to a consulting firm called Pinecrest Advisory Solutions, listed as legal strategy support. The firm had no website. Its address led to a UPS store. Its listed founder? Eleanor's middle name was Louise. Boom! It was enough to drag Eleanor back into the station. Performing arts, the performance of a lifetime. Eleanor arrived with a high-end attorney and crocodile tears. She wore all black and brought cookies for the officers. Vega wasn't impressed. "You're under investigation for financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction," Vega said. "I've done nothing wrong," Eleanor replied. That company was set up to manage HOA strategy projects, like security upgrades and zoning advocacy. It's all in the books. But you didn't disclose ownership. There's no law that says I have to if I'm not drawing a salary. What about the $147,000? She didn't blink. Reimbursements. Expenses. Asked the board. It was approved. Vega stared her down. Douglas was planning to expose you. Eleanor's voice lowered. And he would have been wrong. Test tube, a new test. Meanwhile, forensic techs made a breakthrough. The sugar packet Douglas used? It was laced with aconitine on the inside. Someone had resealed it professionally, something not easily done without lab-grade tools. So the poisoning wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was planned, carefully, deliberately. That ruled out an impulsive suspect, like Mallory Dunn. It also meant the suspect had access to Douglas's drink or the snack table before the meeting. Security footage was pulled. There, in grainy but clear detail, was Phil Rosser, the HOA secretary, rifling through the sugar packets 15 minutes before the meeting. Phil's confession, or was it? Confronted, Phil broke almost instantly. "I didn't mean to kill him," he sobbed. "He was going to ruin everything. Eleanor said it'd destroy the whole board." "So you poisoned him?" "No, I just did what I was told. I gave him the sugar. I didn't know it was laced." "Then who laced it?" Phil wiped his nose. "Ask Rhonda. She was the one who kept saying Douglas was a threat. But he needed to be stopped." The case was unraveling fast. Firecracker, the second letter. As Vega was preparing search warrants for Rhonda's house, Another envelope arrived at the station. No stump. Hand-delivered. Inside, you're only looking at the surface. Douglas wasn't just going after Eleanor. He found something bigger. Start with the 2019 lawsuit. X. Detective Vega's stomach sank. She pulled up archive case files. In 2019, the Lakeview Pines HOA had been quietly sued by a resident named Trina Hale. The case was sealed, but the note was right. Douglas had represented the HOA. Trina had vanished from the neighborhood a month after it was settled, and no one had heard from her since. Detective Marina Vega had solved dozens of complex cases in her career, but the Lakeview Pines poisoning was turning into something else entirely. What began as a murder mystery was now unraveling as a deeply layered conspiracy, fraud, cover-ups, and now, possibly, a disappearance no one had bothered to report. Who was Trina Hale, and why had the HOA gone to such great lengths to bury her story? Woman detective, the missing resident. According to the HOA's outdated records, Trina Hale had purchased a home on Rincourt in late 2018. She was a software engineer, mid-30s, no family listed. Her house had been foreclosed quietly in early 2020, just under a year after the lawsuit she filed against the HOA was settled and sealed. No forwarding address. No missing persons report. No neighbors had seen her since. The property was now a rental, owned by a shell company, Silverline Ventures LLC. Vega made a note to look into that later. First, she tracked down the only person listed as a witness in the sealed case, a former HOA maintenance contractor named Evan Pike. Person standing the whistleblower who vanished. Evan Pike was hard to find. He'd left town a year ago, and his phone had been disconnected. It took Vega 2 days and a contact at the DMV to track him to a small town 2 hours north. When she knocked on his door, he opened it with a shotgun in hand. "I told you people to leave me alone," he said. "I'm not from the HOA," Vega replied calmly. "I'm from the police, and I think your silence may be helping cover up a murder." He stared at her for a long time before lowering the weapon. The testimony. Over coffee in his dimly lit kitchen, Evan talked. She was smart, he said. Trina, too smart. She noticed things nobody else did. The HOA had a slush fund, payments to vendors that didn't exist. I'd done a few repair jobs and saw the invoices being doubled, sometimes tripled. Trina had caught on and started documenting everything. She had emails, audio, even drone footage of Eleanor meeting some guy behind a maintenance shed every Thursday at 10 p.m. Douglas Brantley had been the HOA's lawyer during Trina's lawsuit. According to Evan, Douglas offered Trina a massive settlement, but with one condition. She had to disappear. Luggage voluntary relocation. Vega's hands went cold. She was scared. Evan continued. Said Douglas told her she'd be handled if she didn't take the deal. Next thing I know, she's gone. House cleaned out overnight. I called, texted, nothing. Did she leave of her own will? I don't know, but she didn't sound like she was running away. She sounded cornered. Evan gave Vega an old hard drive. She gave this to me, said to only share it if something ever happened to her, or to Douglas. Back in her car, Vega didn't wait. She plugged the drive into her laptop. Laptop computer, the hard drive. Inside, a folder titled HOA_bombs. It contained invoices for over $200,000 in fake landscaping fees, drone videos of unlicensed contractors unloading materials into HOA-owned storage units at night, email exchanges between Eleanor and a real estate developer discussing illegal rezoning plans, an audio file labeled Douglas_final.mp3. Vega clicked it. Douglas's voice came through. "You know they won't stop, Trina, but I can get you out. I know people. We'll say it was a buyout settlement, and you relocate quietly. You sign a release, and it all dies. Trina, and if I don't, Douglas, then I can't protect you." Eleanor isn't bluffing. There was a long pause. Trina's voice again. "Ooh, fine. But if anything happens to me, I'm taking her down. And you too." Magnifying glass tilted left, Silverline Ventures. Vega now had a new focus. Silverline Ventures LLC, the company that had purchased Trina's house after she vanished. Records showed it was registered by a third-party law firm, that Douglas Brantley once worked with. Eleanor's name didn't appear on paper, but Rhonda Bell, the HOA treasurer, was listed as a contract consultant on several internal memos. Vega had her smoking gun. If the HOA had laundered embezzled money through fake vendors and buried whistleblowers using real estate shell companies, Douglas was involved and then silenced when he turned against them. And someone in the HOA knew he was going to expose them. Microscope the twist in the toxin. Just as Vega was building her case, the forensic lab called with an update on the poison used. It wasn't pure aconitine. It had been mixed with a rare binder used in handmade essential oil capsules, which meant the poison had been ingested, not stirred into coffee. It was likely inside something Douglas consumed before the meeting. A vitamin capsule? A supplement? Vega returned to the original crime scene, reviewing footage frame by frame. That's when she saw it. Douglas taking a small pill from a prescription bottle right before the meeting began. Vega got the bottle from Douglas's briefcase, still in police evidence. Inside were 10 capsules. Lab tests revealed 9 were harmless. 1 was lethal. Direct hit too precise to be random. Who could have accessed Douglas's pills? He was meticulous. Paranoid, even. Someone had to have swapped just one. That narrowed the field drastically. Only one person had unrestricted access to Douglas's belongings before the meeting. His assistant, Nina Fielding, a name no one had mentioned once. Until now. The name Nina Fielding hadn't come up once in the investigation, which was odd, because for the past 4 years, she'd been Douglas Brantley's shadow, his executive assistant, scheduler, confidant, and gatekeeper. She handled his legal paperwork, his calls, and more importantly, his medication. When Detective Vega dug deeper, she found that Nina was more than a loyal aide. She was the one person who knew Douglas's routine down to the minute. Woman office worker, the assistant, with a secret. A polite knock on Nina's apartment door went unanswered. Vega tried again, then again. Finally, the landlord opened it with a master key. The apartment was empty. No signs of struggle. No suitcase missing. No notes. Just a perfectly clean space. Too clean. But inside a small fireproof safe under the kitchen sink, Vega found a stack of legal documents with Douglas's handwriting and a notebook labeled CYA, the final version. Cover your ass. Inside were handwritten logs Douglas had kept for years. Most were about HOA cases, deals, bribes, off-the-record threats. But the final entry was different. April 3rd, 7:19 a.m. I don't trust Nina anymore. She's been quiet since I told her about the March 4th meeting. I think she's been in contact with Eleanor. I should have fired her months ago. She knows everything. If anything happens to me, she's the only one with access to the pills. Vega exhaled slowly. Douglas had known, and still, he kept her close. The deleted texts. Vega had Nina's phone records pulled. Deleted messages showed encrypted conversations with a number registered to a prepaid burner phone. But one message remained in plain text, retrieved from her iCloud backup. Nina, it's done. It will make it past the weekend. Unknown. We'll wire your final bonus once the dust settles. No mistakes. Time stamped. 2 days before the meeting. That was all Vega needed. The real mastermind. Vega traced the burner phone to a rented car used 3 times in the past month. Surveillance footage from the lot showed the renter. Rhonda Bell, HOA treasurer. Vega pieced it all together. Eleanor Crane was embezzling funds through a fake company. Rhonda was laundering the money through real estate shells like Silverline Ventures. Douglas had helped facilitate these deals until Trina Hale exposed them. After Trina's relocation, Douglas had a change of heart. He planned to leak everything and bring the HOA empire down. Nina, aware of everything, was bought off. But not by Eleanor. By Rhonda. Bomb aboard divided. Vega arrested Rhonda Bell that evening. At first, Rhonda denied everything. Then Vega placed the hard drive, the audio tapes, and the burner phone record on the table. Rhonda folded. It wasn't supposed to go that far, she said. He was going to nuke all of us. We were just buying time. I told Nina to scare him, not kill him. But Nina had disappeared. Likely with the $80,000 bonus. Rhonda had paid her through an untraceable wire from the HOA's landscaping fund. Rhonda and Eleanor were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, witness intimidation, and in Rhonda's case, accessory to murder. Man judged the courtroom fallout. News of the scandal exploded. Lakeview Pines residents were furious. Half the board resigned. The HOA faced a class action lawsuit. Property values plummeted. Eleanor, ever cold and calculating, took a plea deal. She served 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement and obstruction. Rhonda received 18 years for her role in the poisoning plot. As for Nina, she was never found. Interpol issued a red notice. Rumors placed her in Belize. Others said she never left the country, just vanished into another HOA community under a fake name. Douglas Brantley was buried with full honors by the state bar. A flawed man, yes, but one who tried to make things right too late. Scroll epilogue, the last clause. 6 months after the trial, Detective Vega received a letter. No return address. Inside was a short note. He knew the truth, and he didn't run. That's more than I can say for most of them. Don't look for me. I'm not the villain. N. Attached was a flash drive. It contained a final recording from Douglas. He had secretly filmed one last meeting with Eleanor, dated just 2 weeks before his death. In it, she says, "This place runs on secrets, Douglas. You leak even one, and we all go down. Even you." His response, "Then maybe it's time the whole place burns." And in a way it did. Lakeview Pines got a new HOA, a new charter, and new policy. No more sealed meetings, no more secret deals, and no more lawyers who smile too easily.